My mother slapped me so hard that my engagement ring flew off my finger and landed in the middle of the Thanksgiving table beside the turkey. Nobody gasped. Nobody defended me. My sister just smiled, picked up my ring, and said, "You should have given him to me when Mom asked." My father nodded like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. They all believed my fiancé would choose my younger sister if they pressured me hard enough. What none of them noticed was that the front door had just opened, and the man they were fighting over had heard every single word. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and until last Thanksgiving, I believed love could fix almost anything, including the family I was born into. I work as an interior designer in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I built a quiet life that finally felt like my own. 2 years ago, I met Daniel, a civil engineer with an easy smile and the rare ability to make me feel heard without saying much. He never tried to rescue me from my past. He simply reminded me day after day that kindness wasn't supposed to come with conditions. When he proposed beside a mountain lake during a weekend trip, I said yes before he even finished asking. For the first time, my future looked brighter than my memories. The only shadow over our engagement was my family. My younger sister, Olivia, had always been the center of my parents' universe. If we both wanted the same thing, she got it. If she made a mistake, someone else was blamed. If I achieved something, it somehow became another opportunity to praise her instead. Growing up, I convinced myself it didn't matter. I studied harder, worked longer, and stayed quieter, hoping that one day my parents would notice me for who I was instead of comparing me to Olivia. That day never came. Daniel noticed the imbalance almost immediately. After meeting my parents for the first time, he gently asked if they had always treated my sister differently. I smiled and told him every family had its quirks. The truth was much harder to admit. Over the months, Olivia became strangely interested in our wedding plans. She wanted to know where Daniel bought my ring, what kind of suit he planned to wear, even whether we'd thought about postponing the ceremony. I laughed off her questions, telling myself she was simply excited. Looking back now, I realized the warning signs were everywhere. A week before Thanksgiving, my mother called sounding unusually cheerful. "This year will be different," she promised. "Let's finally celebrate as one happy family." I wanted to believe her. I should have listened to the feeling in my stomach instead. Because before we even sat down at that dinner table, my family had already decided exactly what they wanted to take from me. Thanksgiving afternoon arrived colder than usual, but Daniel squeezed my hand as we walked up my parents' front porch. "You don't have to stay if things get uncomfortable," he whispered. I smiled, more grateful for those words than I could explain. "I think it'll be okay," I lied. The moment my mother opened the door, she wrapped Daniel in a warm hug before barely acknowledging me. "There you are," she said brightly. "We've been waiting for our future son-in-law." Not future son-in-law and daughter. Just him. Inside, the house looked exactly as I remembered. The dining table overflowed with polished dishes, candles flickered in the windows, and the smell of roasted turkey filled every room. To anyone walking through that front door, we probably looked like the picture of a perfect American family. Then Olivia came downstairs. She looked unusually dressed up for a family dinner, wearing a fitted burgundy dress and enough perfume that Daniel noticed it before she even reached us. She hugged him just a little too long. "I'm so happy you're here," she said with a smile. Daniel politely stepped back. "So am I," he replied, moving closer to me without saying another word. I noticed my mother watching the exchange with quiet approval instead of discomfort. That familiar knot tightened in my stomach. Dinner began with harmless conversation. My father asked Daniel about work. My mother praised his career, his manners, even his choice of wine. Olivia laughed at every joke he made, even the ones that weren't funny. Almost no one asked me a single question. I had lived through that feeling my entire childhood, yet somehow it still hurt. Halfway through dinner, my mother gently placed her fork on the table. "I've been thinking about something important," she announced. Everyone looked toward her. She folded her hands together and smiled as though she were about to make a heartfelt toast. "Emily," she began softly, "you've always been the responsible one. You've always understood sacrifice." I forced a smile. I guess so. She nodded. Then you'll understand why I believe Olivia deserves Daniel more than you do. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. Then my father calmly nodded in agreement. Olivia leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile. And suddenly, I realized this wasn't a joke. They had planned this conversation long before I ever walked through their front door. For several seconds, nobody spoke. I searched every face around the table, waiting for someone to laugh and admit this was some terrible Thanksgiving prank. Nobody did. My mother looked at me with complete seriousness. "Emily," she said calmly, "Olivia has always had a harder time finding someone who truly appreciates her. You already have a successful career. You'll recover. She deserves this chance." I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. "You're asking me to end my engagement." "I'm asking you to do what's right," she interrupted. I turned toward Olivia, hoping she looked as uncomfortable as I felt. Instead, she was smiling. Not an embarrassed smile, a confident one. She folded her napkin neatly onto the table. "I've liked Daniel since the day you introduced us," she admitted. "Honestly, I think he settled for you, because I wasn't available." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You can't possibly believe that," she shrugged. "I think deep down he's always wanted me." My father took a slow sip of coffee before speaking. "Emily, relationships change. Mature people know when it's time to step aside." Something inside me finally snapped.
No.
The word came out steadier than I expected. "I'm not ending my engagement because the three of you decided Olivia wants my fiancé." The room went silent again. My mother's expression hardened. "I didn't raise you to be this selfish." "No," I answered quietly. "You raised me to believe I should give Olivia everything she wanted." Her chair scraped sharply across the hardwood floor as she stood. "Watch your tone." I remained seated. "I'm done apologizing for existing." The slap came so fast, I barely saw her hand move. The crack echoed through the dining room. My head turned with the force of it. For one stunned second, all I could hear was the ringing in my ears. My engagement ring slipped from my finger, bounced against my wineglass, and landed beside the serving platter in the center of the table. No one rushed toward me. No one asked if I was okay. Olivia reached across the table first. She picked up my ring between two fingers and admired it under the dining room light. Then she looked straight at me. "You should have given him to me when Mom asked," she said. "You were never the one he was meant to marry." My mother lifted her hand again. This time, I didn't lower my eyes. I stood. "If you touch me again," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "I'm leaving this house and never coming back." Before anyone could answer, the front door opened. Heavy footsteps crossed the entryway. Then a familiar voice broke the silence. "I think she's already given all of you far more chances than you ever deserved." Every head turned toward the doorway. Daniel was standing there, and from the look on his face, he had heard enough. The entire dining room froze. Daniel stood in the doorway with the bakery box still in one hand, the cold November air drifting in behind him. He had gone back to the car to grab the pumpkin pie we'd picked up on the way over. None of us had realized he'd returned while my family was busy tearing me apart. His eyes found me first. Not my mother, not my father, not Olivia, just me. The red mark on my cheek, the tears I was trying so hard not to let fall. Without saying a word, he walked straight across the room and stopped beside me. "Emily," he asked quietly, "are you hurt?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "My face will be okay." His jaw tightened. Then, he gently took my hand. The engagement ring was still resting in Olivia's palm. Daniel looked at her. "I believe that belongs to my fiancé." Olivia's confident smile barely wavered. "You heard what Mom said," she replied. "You deserve someone who's actually right for you." "I agree," Daniel answered. Her smile grew wider. "I do deserve someone who's right for me." For a split second, Olivia looked victorious. Then Daniel reached toward her open hand, picked up the ring, turned toward me, and carefully slipped it back onto my finger. "The woman who's right for me," he finished, "is Emily." The room fell completely silent. Olivia's smile disappeared as though someone had switched off a light. My father cleared his throat. Daniel, emotions are running high. Maybe you should think this through before making a decision. Daniel slowly turned toward him. I made my decision the day I asked Emily to marry me. My mother stepped forward. You don't understand. Olivia has always been the better match. Daniel looked at her with calm disbelief. No, he said. What I understand is that you just struck your daughter because she refused to surrender her own future. Nobody answered. He continued, his voice steady. I've watched Emily make excuses for all of you since the day we met. Every cruel comment became, they're just stressed. Every insult became, that's just how they are. Tonight, I finally saw what she has been protecting. Olivia tried one last time. I've always cared about you, Daniel. He shook his head. No. You've only cared about winning. Then he looked at me. Emily, let's go home. I nodded, believing the nightmare was finally over. I couldn't have been more wrong, because before we even reached the front door, my mother shouted something that changed everything again. My mother's voice followed us all the way to the driveway. If you walk out that door, she shouted, don't expect this family to forgive you. I stopped for only a second. Then Daniel squeezed my hand, and together we kept walking. The ride home was almost silent. I stared out the passenger window, replaying the slap, Olivia holding my engagement ring, and my father's complete indifference. Every memory felt unreal, like I had watched someone else's family fall apart instead of my own. Daniel finally reached over and rested his hand on mine. You never have to see them again, he said softly. For the first time that night, I believed him. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. At first, I thought they were checking to see if I was okay. They weren't. Most of them had already heard my parents' version of the story. According to my mother, I had ruined Thanksgiving by throwing a childish tantrum. According to my father, Daniel had overreacted to a harmless family discussion. According to Olivia, she had simply confessed an innocent crush, and I became jealous and violent. I read every message in complete disbelief. It was as if I had attended an entirely different dinner. For 2 days, I said nothing. Part of me hoped the lies would eventually collapse on their own. Instead, they spread. Then Daniel sat beside me on our couch one evening. You've spent your whole life protecting people who never protected you, he said gently. You don't owe them your silence. He was right. So I answered the people who mattered. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't insult anyone. I simply described exactly what had happened, from the moment my mother demanded I give Olivia my fiancé to the moment she slapped me across the face. One by one, the responses changed. Several relatives apologized for believing the rumors. Others admitted my parents had always favored Olivia but never imagined it had gone that far. Within days, the sympathy my parents expected began disappearing. Instead of defending them, relatives started asking uncomfortable questions. My mother became furious. She left furious voicemails accusing me of destroying the family. Then, 3 days later, my cousin Megan sent me a text. Emily, I think you need to see this. Attached was a video recorded during Thanksgiving dinner. I pressed play. And within seconds, I realized the camera had captured the one thing my parents could never explain away. My hands trembled as I opened the video. It had been recorded by my cousin Megan's 16-year-old son, who had been filming everyone's reactions before dinner for a family montage. He had forgotten to stop recording when the conversation turned serious. The camera wasn't perfect. It didn't capture every face, but it captured every voice. I watched my mother calmly tell me that Olivia deserved Daniel more than I did. I heard my father agree without hesitation. I heard Olivia say Daniel had only settled for me. Then came the sound that made my stomach tighten all over again. The slap. Even through a phone speaker, it echoed across the room. The camera jerked downward from surprise, but it continued recording. A few seconds later, Olivia's voice came through clearly. You should have given him to me when Mom asked. Then Daniel walked into frame. His words were just as calm as I remembered. I believe that belongs to my fiancé. The recording ended shortly after we left the house. It lasted barely 4 minutes. 4 minutes were enough to destroy months of lies. Megan didn't post it online. Neither did I. She simply shared it privately with the relatives who had been criticizing me. Within 24 hours, the phone calls changed completely. The same aunt who had accused me of embarrassing my parents called to apologize through tears. An uncle admitted he had ignored signs of favoritism for years because it was easier than confronting my parents. Several cousins reached out simply to say they believed me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting alone. Meanwhile, my parents' story completely collapsed. No one could explain away the slap. No one could defend demanding that a daughter surrender her fiancé to her sister. Their excuses grew quieter with every passing day. A week later, my father left a voicemail. His voice sounded older than I remembered. He asked if we could meet. He said the family needed to heal. He said my mother wanted a chance to explain. I listened to the message twice before deleting it. Then another voicemail arrived. This time, it wasn't an explanation. It was a plea. Daniel looked at me and quietly asked, "Do you need answers, or do you already have them?" I thought about that for a long time. Then I realized something that changed me forever. For the first time in my life, I didn't need my parents' approval to know I had done the right thing. I never returned my father's calls. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I had finally learned that protecting my peace wasn't the same as punishing someone else. A month later, a handwritten letter arrived. It wasn't an apology. It was another request. My parents wanted us to meet, one last time as a family. After talking it over with Daniel, I agreed, not because I expected them to change, but because I wanted to walk away without wondering if I had left anything unsaid. We met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between our cities. My mother looked tired. My father looked uncomfortable. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Finally, my mother reached across the table. "We've all made mistakes," she said softly. "Can't we just move on?" I looked at her hand resting between us. Then I looked into her eyes. "You still call it a mistake?" She frowned. "What else would you call it?" "I'd call it a choice." Silence settled over the table. "You chose Olivia over me every single time.
You chose to humiliate me.
You chose to slap me. And afterward, you chose to lie about it." Neither of them argued. For the first time in my life, they had nothing left to say. My father cleared his throat. "So, that's it." I smiled sadly.
No.
I reached for Daniel's hand. "This is the beginning." I stood, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I hope one day you understand what you lost." Then we walked away. 3 months later, Daniel and I stood beneath a canopy of white flowers, surrounded by people who had spent years proving they loved us through actions instead of words. Mark, Daniel's father, hugged me before walking me down the aisle because he said every bride deserved to feel cherished on her wedding day. His mother cried through the entire ceremony, not because she was losing a son, because she said she was gaining a daughter. As I looked around at our friends and the family who had chosen kindness over pride, I realized something beautiful. The people who share your last name aren't always the people who deserve your heart. Real family is built through love, respect, and safety. My parents spent years trying to convince me that love had to be earned by sacrifice. They were wrong. The greatest gift I ever gave myself wasn't walking away from them. It was finally walking toward the people who never asked me to give away pieces of myself just to be loved.